Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to rise this evening to speak on Bill C-39. Before I do, I want to let you know that I'll be splitting my time with the member for Saanich, Gulf Islands. This legislation might be the simplest that I've had a chance to speak on in the House since being elected, but it's also one of the more serious and emotional. It, simply put, allows for an extension for mental illness to be a condition that a person would be eligible to have with respect to medical assistance in dying. I strongly support this delay for three reasons. The first is that I've heard from so many neighbours of mine in Kitchener with their concerns. In particular, I remember at one conversation that a group had in their backyard. It was a bit of a colder night just last month. Colder afternoon. And it was Hannah and Peter and some friends of theirs. And they wanted to share with me specifically some of their serious concerns with medical assistance in dying being expanded further than it already had been. And I really appreciated them for sharing some of their stories, their concerns, and their recommendations. In my view, that was the best of how our democracy is supposed to function. For folks like myself that are sitting in legislatures like this one, who have a say in laws like this, to be hearing from neighbours and from their concerns. And in that conversation and emails since, it's been almost universal that folks in my community wanted to see a delay, at least a delay, if not more. Secondly, I'm supportive because we've heard from experts across the country, doctors and healthcare professionals. On December 1st, in particular, I really appreciated hearing from the Association of Chairs of Psychiatry in Canada. This includes the heads of the psychiatry departments of all 17 medical schools across the country, as they appealed for the governing party to delay what was then an expected expansion of MAID for those with mental illness. The third reason I'm supportive is because I believe we should spend more time closing the social safety net before we expand medical assistance in dying. And I would put it to all colleagues here, why is it that we are seeing a movement to expand medical assistance in dying much more quickly than we're seeing an expansion to the social safety net? I'll give a few examples. In my community, as colleagues well know, I've shared it many times, the unsheltered population has tripled in the last 3 years, from just over 300 to over 1,000 people living rough. It's clear that what's being done when it comes to the affordability of housing is not nearly enough. We're going in the wrong direction, and that more needs to be done. As well, when it comes to income supports, whether that's a guaranteed livable income for all, or as many in this place, myself included, have pushed very hard for, a guaranteed income for those with disabilities across the country. And while we've made progress, and I'm glad to see that C-22 is passed in this House and is now in the Senate, the fact is that it's yet to be funded. And I would strongly encourage the governing party to fund the Canada Disability Benefit to get on with closing the social safety net with the urgency that deserves. And thirdly, well, mental health specifically. Just last week, we saw a big announcement about health care. And yet, absent from that announcement was dedicated mental health funding. All the more egregious when in the 2021 campaign, the governing party ran that campaign on a commitment for a $4.5 billion mental health transfer to be called the Canada Mental Health Transfer. And I hope there's no sleight of hand here that with this new healthcare announcement that we're not going to continue to see dedicated mental health funding. I think it's imperative on all parliamentarians in this place to continue to apply pressure to ensure the Canada Mental Health Transfer is in Budget 2023. When I last asked the Parliamentary Secretary about it Thursday night, I did not get a clear answer, and I think it should concern all of us. to not see dedicated mental health funding. In fact, it's this absence of sufficient supports on affordable housing, on income supports, and on mental health care that I joined the CEO of the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo Wellington to encourage the Minister of Justice to follow through on the delay that had been promised in December of last year, and I'm glad to see the follow through on that. With my remaining time before I close, I just want to give a quick mention of the importance of quality journalism in this country and how it relates to this legislation, Mr. Speaker, because I'm glad to hear that all parties are supportive of C-39, but I'm not surprised to hear that because of the work of Althea Raj and the Toronto Star. Specifically, back in November, as other members have shared, Ms. Raj spoke with the Minister of Justice, and at the time he said, well, nothing can be done. It needs legislative. In fact, the quote is that it would be a challenge in the current Parliament to delay the expansion of medical assistance in dying. And so Ms. Raj did something very reasonable. She then reached out to all of the opposition parties, the Green Party included, and asked them if they would support. Opposition parties responded. Days later, on December 11th, Ms. Raj published an article sharing that all opposition parties are actually supportive of what is now Bill C-39. The question was put back to the Minister of Justice, and days later, on December 15th, it was announced that this legislation would come before this House. And so while there are many advocates and many campaigns that lead towards legislation such as this one, I think it's important we call out and appreciate nonpartisan journalists across the country who are doing such important work to help bring to light the agreement that sometimes is here to move forward with important changes like the ones we're discussing, and to call out what might be certain rebuttals that may or may not be justified. In this case, it wasn't, and I appreciate Ms. Raj, as well as the medical professionals I mentioned earlier, the chairs of Psychiatry of Canada, for their advocacy that brought us to this point. So, in closing, Mr. Speaker, I applaud the governing party for introducing C-39, for following through on this promise that was made back in December, for listening to the need to slow down. I have no doubt that other parliamentarians across the country heard similar concerns as I did from Hannah and Peter and so many others. But I also encourage them to move more quickly on the social supports that are needed in my community and across the country. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my friend from Kitchener Centre for his speech. I do agree with him that there's obviously a need to invest more heavily into mental health supports. But I do want to just ask him, if you look at how medical assistance in dying has evolved in the last 7 years, and the way Bill C-7 brought forward the issue of mental health as a sole and underlying condition, and where we're at today, whether he can reflect to see if we're moving at a right pace or if we're moving too fast, because I think from what I'm hearing from him, he's suggesting that we're moving really fast, but we're really moving based on the science that's available. And in fact, the expert panel report suggested that we are in fact ready to move forward. So if you can maybe comment on the available science on this issue.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the question to the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice. He is a person and a member in this place who I really enjoy working with, that is focused on working together to get things done for people as opposed to parties, and I really appreciate that. I think this question is an important one, but if I'm really to answer it honestly, I haven't yet seen the result of the special committee in place that is meant to report back to Parliament on the research that they've been doing. And I think it's important to rely on committees of this House to share the research and the work that they've been doing. And so I'm really looking forward to reading what they come out with. And I hope that what they recommend, we'll have time over the coming year, and the governing party will take it seriously to move forward on those recommendations and ensure that sufficient changes are put in place. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member from Kitchener Centre. This bill at this point is necessary for us to ensure that we are protecting those most vulnerable. And to me, it speaks to, and to many of us as we're hearing in here, it speaks to a bigger issue that this government is leaving many behind. And I appreciate that my colleagues spoke to the importance of us, what was the wording, closing the social safety net, and speaking about the importance of the Canada Disability Supports, appropriate mental health supports, affordable housing, guaranteed livable basic income. There's many components necessary for us to move forward to address the bigger issue here. I'm wondering if the member can share with us what he is hearing from constituents in his riding around what is most vital for us to move forward with so that those who are struggling most have what they need to get through each day. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Well, first of all, thank you to the member for Nanaimo Ladysmith for the question, because I also know what a champion she's been in this place to push for people with disabilities to get the follow-through that they've been promised and that they've advocated so strongly for over so many years. We could cut poverty by 40% in this country by providing a guaranteed income for every person with a disability who are right now disproportionately living in legislated poverty. And it's a national embarrassment, in my view, that we haven't done more already. And I certainly wish, whether it's related to providing a guaranteed income for folks with disabilities and funding the Canada Disability Benefit, or following through on the Canada Mental Health Transfer. I think it's important for our democracy that political parties and leaders follow through on promises they've made. And I'm going to continue to be pushing alongside her and others in this place in the lead up to Budget 2023 to see those important commitments followed through on. Thank you.